What's up, guys? This is Natalie casting to you at 4 o'clock on Wednesday for video game design at EdAlliance. If you are there in the chat, let me know that you can hear me talking and that you are here in general. I just want to, as always, know who's joining me for these live casts. Oh my gosh. Oh, yay. I see Neural is here. I'm so excited. Hey. Oh, hey, Dan. Good to see you too. Oh my goodness. I knew you'd be back. Couldn't quit. It's video game design is so addictive. It's great to see you in the chat, Neural. Great to see you, Dan. So glad you guys are here today. As always, casting to you with exciting things. We're polishing games towards creating a beta release of some of our projects right now. And just talking some advanced Unity stuff because most of the people on the team in this studio, I think, are ready for that. So I'll get started in a little bit, but I did want to let you guys know that, I'm very excited. I've had a few tech upgrades. So not only do I have faster internet, I also have a dual monitor setup. So I'm very excited, and Dan, you'll be jealous of this. It's funny. We had talked about how great it is. I know. Dan's like, whoa. So this whole time I was like, oh, I don't have two monitors. This is so annoying. And then I discovered that I can use my partner's monitor with my computer as well. So I hooked this sucker up that we have in our other office, and I know. I am very lucky. I'm very lucky. I know. It's so great. So, of course, you guys will see me doing some Unity stuff here, and I will just look over here because that's where the monitor is. It's right over here. So, of course, what you see on the screen is on my other big fancy monitor. And I'm so excited to have the technology I need to broadcast to you guys. Oh my gosh, here's David. Wasn't first. Yep, Neural beat you this time. That is rare. But hopefully you're back for good now. I see Neural is saying, now I try to finish my game since I have internet. Fantastic. Very excited about that. It is the worst to be in a pandemic with no internet. I have been having that issue myself. We had some major internet issues this past week. I was having meetings with people and getting cut off, and nightmare. But I'm hoping to be all good to broadcast to you guys today. If I do cut out for a minute, as always, I like to say just be patient. Reload the browser if you're watching it in a browser, or just close the app and open it again if you're watching on your phone, if something does go wrong. And if there is a cataclysmic failure, as always, I'll let you know in the chat. Otherwise, you can just be patient and I'll be back very soon should something terrible happen and I get cut off from you this afternoon. So I wanted to actually kick off this cast by giving you guys a quick preview of some fun things that are coming up. And the first one of those things is the Code Games Challenge, which I believe I shared with David. But I just wanted to let you guys all know that this is happening. And this, of course, is a thing that we at Eline are partnering with some other organizations to offer to people all around the world. So if you guys did participate in our April challenge, which was just for this studio, you'll find that this is similar. It is a game making challenge, just like the one we did. And very similarly to ours, there's also some different themes where you can make games. So if you're interested in making games for actual cash prizes, guys, you should check this out and sign up to make a game for the Code Games Global Game Making Challenge. The page has details. You can go to codegameschallenge.org if you want to join in. But there's a few themes listed here, I think exploration, environment, and equity are the themes. And then they have a lot of platforms that are the option. I don't remember where that is on the website. Let's see if I can find it for you guys. Oh, that's the login. Yes, here we go. So if you're interested in doing this, you can make a game using any of the platforms shown here. So Scratch, The Endless Mission, which you guys should have access to, I think. I know you guys got beta codes. If you're still interested in that, let me know. But Game Star Mechanic and, of course, Unity is an option. And my assumption is if you guys were interested in doing this, Unity would be the one you would choose. So anyway, it's just something that's happening. It's going on between May and October. And it's a really exciting opportunity to kind of take your game making to the next level. I mean, so happy to work with you guys in this studio, and I expect that you will continue to join us for more game making every week. But, if it's exciting to you to consider making something for a wider audience, this would be a great place to take your work and really polish it up. I see Emmy in the chat. Hey, Emmy, good to see you today. We got a lot of folks in. I'm so glad. Welcome. I meant to say, so as you guys know, normally we have it the other way around where Dan casts on Wednesday and I cast on Monday. And on Monday, my internet was completely broken. And so Dan stepped in at the very last second to teach you guys about some really great programming stuff. So once again, thank you to Dan for switching the days. And now I'm here on Wednesday. So, if you guys if you weren't there on Monday, you should check out Dan's video, which is on our YouTube channel, Make Room on YouTube. He did some really great stuff about recursion, lists, and some really, really key programming concepts if you want to take your games to that next level. So check it out, because if you want to be a good game maker, you definitely need to be a good programmer. All right, so let's minimize the Code Games Challenge. And I am going to talk about one more thing that's upcoming. And the thing that's upcoming is next week is going to be a little bit of a different format. So Monday is Memorial Day, which means there won't be this broadcast on Monday. So it's a day off from school, from work, whatever, and you should take that day and enjoy of it what you can, given that we're in this global crisis. But hopefully you guys can have some fun on that day and just hang out a little bit. We will not have game making on Monday. And then on Wednesday, we will be having a special guest of Brian joining the cast. So we will have the return of the dual head cast, hopefully this time with no echo. And my hope is to have you guys send any updates you have on your game projects, push those up into the cloud, and Brian and I will be looking at your game prototypes and playtesting. So I'm really excited to give Brian a look at what you guys have been working on. So that day would be, let's see, Wednesday the 27th would be the day to have anything you've changed push into collab. I see Narelle saying, I don't know about mine. I know you haven't had internet, so this is a do what you can situation. Absolutely. Not expecting to see like a polished alpha when you haven't had internet. So, and David is saying, I can barely work on my project until there is a deadline. I feel that so hard. I need deadlines so bad myself. And honestly, I was realizing we didn't have one. So we need a deadline. And Brian said he wanted to play test. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to really polish something up. So people specifically in this team, I think, David, we would be looking for some improvements to 3 Fortnights at Home, if you're still working on that. And then Emmy, what we're calling unnamed toilet paper game. I realized, so last time I was talking about that, it was a reference to the like Untitled Goose Game. But I said unnamed instead of untitled, and I'm just like, what is even real? But now in my head, I have it called Unnamed Toilet Paper Game. So if you wanted me to call it something else, just let me know what the title of the game is. But I think it would be really cool to show that to Brian. And that game, I think we would want to see some UI in there. I actually haven't pulled your most recent version, so forgive me if you have worked on some stuff to still don't have a title. Oh my gosh, she's like, I don't know. No worries. It could be unnamed toilet paper game too. But some UI, some kind of HUD situation for that game, just so we know like what we're trying to do, I think is the working goal for that one. And then I'm trying to remember what we said for 3 Fortnights at Home. I know we did some listing of things. Let me actually pull up my document where we did the play testing with Dan last time, and we can see where we're at with that. Let's see, I know I have it here somewhere. Yes. Oh, that's right. We didn't play test that one. All right. So I don't have a list of things for 3 Fortnights at Home, but David, do you know what you want to work on in that game? Let me know in the chat, and we will prioritize maybe what would be the most important improvement. He's saying yes. Great. Yep. It would be awesome to present a version of that to Brian. I'm curious how he would react to the whole like dark web thing. Like that game is intense, man. Brian always has funny reactions to stuff like that too. So I'm excited to see how he feels about all of these. Tuneral, a Trello board. Oh my god, you guys are so funny. This is my favorite studio. It's so much fun to work with you guys on these games. So I was gonna say out to Neural that we were considering doing a beta of Elementals. So if you're interested in doing some engineering work on Elementals, I've been talking to Tayshawn, and he was interested in creating some new sprites for Elementals. I know he doesn't want to do gameplay programming, but if you're interested in that, let me know, because I'm happy to do a little bit of design work at Unity Dev, but I would need someone's participation in revamping the UI in that game. We talked a little bit about ways to make it a more fun experience. Yeah, I see you saying okay there. That'd be awesome. Yeah. I can actually talk a bit about the improvements we wanted to do on that game at the end of this cast. But I did actually get Tayshawn has been improving his art style for the main character and just thinking about some additional art that we could add. Let me see if I can find the sprites that he sent. Yeah, this is a really nice. He sent me a whole sprite sheet this time of a new version of Ethan. And I just think that this is a really nice improvement. I mean, talk about some snazzy hair. So we've already got a little bit of art energy going on with the beta for Elementals. And Norel, if you're interested in doing some gameplay programming in UI, that would be so great. Oh, David's sharing a Trello. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Let's check this out. Yes. This is so professional. Thank you. Thanks for sharing this. Oh my god, I'm so excited. Yeah, so David has a Trello going for 3 Fortnights at Home. Dan, if you're out there, you should definitely check out David's Trello. Yeah, Dan's like, I love Trello. Yeah, me too. Check out that Trello, and maybe if you could comment in the chat when you've had a look to let David know if there's anything specific he should focus on. Anybody, of course, can see that because it's public. So I'm looking now. Actually, here, I can pull it on the screen so we can check it out. More menus, better gameplay. Raycast and controller support. Yes. I do have a comment about the Unity the input system that Dan demonstrated on the cast a couple weeks ago, which is that stuff's a little bit complicated to get running correctly, but it's worth putting the time into getting it set up, because once you've changed your input method over to that system, it's flawless. And having that flawless ability to switch between controllers and keyboard, it's just going to be a million times better. Like when you pull the game up and just run it and it just works. So it's a little bit technical, like Dan said, but I would say it's 100% worth implementing in your project. So this looks really good. Of course, the key is asking, what does better gameplay mean? And let's see what Dan's saying in the chat here, because not sure what is going to go to that. Inventory with items you can use would be pretty cool to focus on first. I think that's a great idea. Inventory is a pretty complicated system, but David, I know you've made a store, so I feel like you could probably make an inventory, and of course you're going to need to use arrays. So arrays and kind of managing a sort of cluster of objects, it would be a great opportunity to revisit some of the stuff Dan has gone over in past broadcasts. The arrays broadcast would be good. Dan, are there any other topics you've addressed that would be helpful in putting together an inventory? So the other thing is, Brian will be able to comment on gameplay, and I'm sure we'll have ideas for, specific things like what Dan is saying in the chat now, for how to make the gameplay loop engaging in that game. So work on it, and then next week on Wednesday, Brian and I will take a look as well, and we'll get some input from a bunch of people, Brian and I, and then Dan will keep looking at it too. We can all kind of give you ideas for ways of making that stuff really, really feel fun. And that is also what I'm going to talk about in this cast. So since you get a lot of programming details from Dan, and that's his focus, I wanted to talk a little bit today more in the track of doing game design. And game design is sort of contrasted with game development in the two approaches Dan and I often take. And so I'm going to take you through a little bit of the design thinking that Dan and I did around our game, which of course is called Pandemic Hanami. So as you know, we have also been making a game. And I showed it on the cast a couple weeks ago when we did play testing. I guess it was right at the end of April, first week in May. We had created this alpha for a social distancing game. And when we did the echo-filled dual cast, Dan and I came up with a list of things that we wanted to improve about this game, similar to the Trello that David has shared. And so we've been working on implementing some of those, and I wanted to start the cast out with doing some things in Unity to talk through what we've been implementing and how we went about changing the game to make the gameplay more engaging and the whole experience more fun. So back to my list here. Let's see. Yeah, we looked at a few games, and this, just as a reminder, was what we had come to when we were playing this game and talking about how to take it into a beta release. So we wanted gameplay variants. We wanted maybe power-ups like a mask or different ways of increasing stress. David suggested we have a hard difficulty. Start with 99 stress. And then different zombie types, a stick meter and a stress meter, like maybe adding a second stat, and also maybe creating a way to get sick. So those were our basic things we thought would be improvements to the game to take it into beta. And these 3 bullet points at the bottom right here were things that we said every game that everybody's making at this stage needs to focus on these 3 elements. So make it feel good to play, have visual indications of everything you do, and varying the gameplay. Those were the things we talked about. So we worked on that a little bit with this, and I'm going to just start out by showing you how the game plays now. I do believe I'm not outputting audio of the game. Could you guys hear the background music of the game? I think the answer to that is no. Okay, I'm going to get us some audio here. Just a second. How about now? Can you guys hear the glorious sounds of Pandemic Hanami? Okay, and of course Narel's famous comment of, "It's been a second." Thank you for your consistency, Narel. All right. So cool. All right. So we got this game. Yeah, I'm gonna hit play. Oh my lord. I got some weird buggy. I was like, what a blob. So of course, as you know, the point of the game is to run around and click on flowers to reduce your stress. And we've got a couple new systems in here that I'll need to play for a minute to demo. One of them is that when I get close to a zombie, there is now a flashing coronavirus on the screen. And if I stand next to them for too long, infected. Okay. So that's one way you can die in addition to getting too stressed out. So you have a second condition that causes you to die. And then we also have a mask power-up now. So I'm going to just play for a second and just enjoy the stressful world of this video game we've created. I'm just working on my stress. You know, now it's really like if I get too close to a zombie, I have to run away because, you know, I might get infected, which nobody wants. And there's my mask. Ooh, fancy. Oh, I'm so excited. What is that? It's glittering. It's glowing. Give it to me. So I think I have it at 18 seconds right now, but, you know, I can go near the zombies and they don't do anything. And the music changes. Oh, and now I'm back in my old situation. So that's basically what we added. We've got a second sort of hidden stat right now, which is the sort of coronavirus thing, which can cause you to die. And then we've got a power-up that makes you, essentially, it's like, oh, I'm immune to death. And then as you can see these guys right here, Dan has implemented one other really great aspect of this game, which is, oh my god, a chance of zombies following you. So we've got a few guys here that will tend to kind of walk in my direction and just wandering randomly. Yeah. Oh no! Oh my gosh. Oh no! No! Too many! Ah! Alright, I'm getting close. I'm gonna try to win this. And hopefully I'll land me another mask. I've got the mask on not too low, or not too high, because otherwise it's too easy. Oh my gosh, those followy guys are really bad. God, there's so many. No. Oh no. Get away from me. Get away from me. Okay. Nope. Okay. Oh my God. There's so many over there. I think I might need to turn down how many are spawning. Okay. Yes! Oh my gosh, no, don't kill me. I need that. All right. Now is my chance. Because I think after this, there will be too many zombies in here to win. I don't know if I can get rid of 20 stress in this section, though. Oh no! Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Oh my gosh. Look at that. Okay. All right. So obviously there's more texture to the gameplay now. Like I'm like, oh my God, and I'm like screaming at this game. Of course, that's my normal behavior. So, but if you remember the way it was before, it was fairly repetitive. We had the zombies running in and out. We had stress. And then we were clicking on flowers. And that was the only thing that you did in the game. So we sat down and said, okay, let's make it more engaging. Let's texture the gameplay. And now we've got some new systems that we've put in the game to play with. And right before this cast, we were actually talking a little bit about maybe how to tune this so that it makes as much sense as possible and is challenging without being impossible. So we were sort of debating about like, should zombies cause coronavirus and stress, or should they just cause coronavirus? And we were talking about, what was the other thing, Dan? I'm trying to remember. If there should be a different looking zombie for the ones that can infect you with the coronavirus. That's right. And the other idea was to do a thing where when I'm wearing the mask, I can actually eliminate zombies by clicking on them. And every zombie I click on when I have the mask on would then walk to the edge of the map and leave. So we're talking about maybe making it so that when you get this like really crowded park, it is actually possible to like tell some zombies to go home only while you're wearing the mask. So a few different ideas there. And I think, yeah, I just wanted to show you guys this. As you can see, Dan added some really fun systems to the way the zombie works in this game. We have a virus probability, which in this version I have turned up to 100%. But we could actually have it be anywhere on here. So, you know, if I wanted to say, you know, 1 in 2 zombies overall will have the virus, that could be cool, where some of them are a little bit safer than others. And then right here, we have a probability that they're going to walk toward you on the map, which is also a nice variety in the way they behave. So instead of all just sort of wandering randomly, a few of them are like, I'm coming for you, which I love that. Like, it's just this whole chaotic mess of like zombies walking around, which, you know, again, the game is kind of trying to evoke this weird feeling you have of going outside right now. And I think that having these 2 probability sliders is such a great way to do that. And it's been really fun to do game design with this. So I wanted to talk to you guys about what I kind of the thought process I went through when I added the mask power up. And I was hoping that this design process would be helpful to you guys in creating power ups in your game and just thinking about how to implement something like this when you already have a game project that exists. So we've got our mask here. I actually had a really fun time with this. I went and found a 3D model of an N95 mask. See if I can find it. I actually have it attached to the head right here. So I I found this game object. I actually got this on Turbo Squid. and I just put it in the scene and attach it to the guy's head on this 3D model. And you can see it actually kind of cuts through him, but like if you click off of it, that looks weird. There we go. It looks pretty good. Like, I don't know. It's just like just throw it on there, but I mean it works. I actually didn't use the other. Where is it? I didn't use the other strap. It had like 2 straps, and I was just like, oh, I don't feel like dealing with this other strap. So I just deleted it. But you can do stuff like this. Like you get a model, it'll come in with the prefab looking like this, and then sometimes you can unroll the pieces and rotate and move things to kind of fit it to something in your game. So, of course, this is a very just quick and dirty solution, but I mean, since I don't 3D model, this is the kind of thing I always do when I'm making them. I just kind of put it together and make something that works. Because I always assume, like, if I was going to do a professional game project, I would have an artist who actually knows how to do modeling in Maya or Blender, and I would pull in those assets and tweak them to fit in the game that I was making. So that's what I'm doing here. It's just I'm pulling assets from the asset store, or in this case from Turbo Squid. So I downloaded this mask as I think an FBX. Just pulled it right in. It worked out of the box. And then I started saying to myself, well, I've got the visuals set up. Now I really need to think about how I'm actually going to program this. And the thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, this really, I got to thinking about this a little bit, and I thought it might be helpful for you guys to hear me talk a little bit about how a game project is typically put together. Because what happens when you've set up a game, I think often is we sit down to make it and we're like, okay, I've got game objects, I've got the scene, I've got 3D models like this, and I just need it to work. So I'm going to do some scripting. I'm going to lay some stuff out. I'm going to set up game objects and do things in Unity, and then I'm going to make it work. And then you're like, okay, it works. And you have all these scripts, and scripts are attached all over the place. And whatever happens, it's fine because the game works and you can play. And that's always how we make prototypes. We just put it all in. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to do what we expect it to do. So now that we're talking about doing games in a way where we want to polish and make them fancy and really fun and taking projects to the next level, I wanted to talk about like some best practices for not just making scripts and making things work, but actually organizing the behavior your game has. Because when I made this mask, I thought about the behavior my game has and where to put the script, or rather where to put the logic for this mask in the scripts I already have, or if I should make a new one. So one of the most common ways that we put together a game project is we sit down, we have a player controller, and we put everything in the player controller. And if you looked at this script, I can actually open it. Obviously, we're not going to like go through every line of this because that would take forever. This is the character controller for this game. So we have a ton of stuff in this script. We have code that causes the character to move. We have code that takes input and moves the character around. We have, what else? We have ground check in here. And then Dan and I have done some extending of this script to include some of the systems that the game has. Like we've got this timer for how long you're in range of an infected zombie. We have Corona time. And we have flower power here, which I actually think this is not used right now, but was part of an early prototype for the interaction with the flowers. So if you look at the script, we go down through it and oh my goodness, there's a lot here. And this is pretty typical. This is typically how we prototype. We just throw some stuff in the player controller and we generally like know logic for a game is because we just open this script and we kind of think of this script as the game. We're like, this is the game. But I wanted to let you know that this is not the only way of doing it. In fact, as Dan has said, there are a million ways of programming basically everything. And so there is another way of dividing your project up that I think can often be a little bit less confusing as the project expands. So let's do a little bit of fun diagrammy stuff. That is too small. Let's keep this just the size that it is. There we go. So I'm going to draw some circles on this, which is why I have paint going. So, all right. So in a game, there's a few different things that you need to do. And the one we were just looking at is, I'm going to just draw some systems here represented by circles. We have the player controller. So the script we were just looking at is a sort of critical game system when you're building a game. And it's the one that lets you control the avatar. So I'm going to say some of the things that would be in this script, just like we saw, are input and like physics, right? Another thing that you also need to keep track of in a game is what we like to call the game state. Whoop, now that's not the same size. How did I get that really big one? I always want it to be so big because that fat line is very satisfying. Okay, so back on the topic. So I'll draw a smaller one. Oh, that's a terrible circle. All right, there we go. So we have logic that controls the player. It's input, it's physics, it's the thing the avatar can do. And then separately from that, though sometimes in the same script, we also have a script or a system in a game that keeps track of the game state. Actually, I'm going to put that in here. So game state. This is often called actually the game manager. In fact, the idea of a game manager script is so common in Unity that if you create a script called game manager, you'll see a special icon generated for you in the scripts folder, or really in any folder in the project. So when you create this system in a game, what you're basically keeping track of is win, lose, playing, as opposed to paused, right? Or paused. So when we say the game state, we mean what state is the game in? Have I won? Am I losing? Am I playing? Am I paused? What's going on in the game? Depending on the game, there are different things that can trigger win or lose, right? So a common example of this is the player's health. If the health is 0, then we lose, right? Finally, another very common thing that you need to keep track of and interact with through a script in a game is UI. So I'm just going to put UI here. There isn't as formal of like script name. I sometimes create a script called UI Manager, but the one that everybody does is Game Manager. UI is different depending on how your game works. Like sometimes UI Manager, sometimes something else. But in a game, you need to do things with the stuff you see on the screen, stuff in the HUD. So anything that involves like the text and moving things on the screen and managing the stuff over there, um, you put in a UI script, right? So show and hide, like show and hide pause, right? Show windscreen. We know what all these things are, right? Menu logic. I'm trying to think of something else. Press buttons, whatever, right? All the sort of UI stuff. And then we have, I'm going to just draw some little circles over here to represent these without actually labeling them. We have all kinds of other game objects in your game that do things. So for example, this might be a zombie. One of these might be the script that controls the zombie moving around and having a chance to run into the player or have a chance to be infected with the coronavirus, whatever it may be. And so the point I'm making by drawing these circles is there are kind of loosely related, similar kinds of things that you need to do in a game that are commonly grouped into their own script. So that, especially when you're collaborating with someone, when you open that script, you kind of already know the kinds of things that are going to be in there. So for example, if I create a script called Game Manager, I can tell that when I open that script, I'm going to be interacting with a script that manages what state the game is in. Am I playing? Did I win? Did I lose? Am I paused? Things like that. If there's different modes in a game, the game manager might handle switching between those modes. It depends on your project, but I'll know that that's what I'm going to change when I open that script. And the nice thing about creating a project this way is that, number one, when you're collaborating, it's clear what the script does when somebody else opens the project. And number two, you won't get confused by having to scroll through a gigantic character controller that is the one size fits all script and the thing that does everything in the game. So this was something I was thinking about with our project, and our project is not laid out exactly like this, but we do kind of have a similar layout in our project. And I wanted to show you guys what that was just so you could get a sense of this design as it is created in our project specifically. So in our project, let's head to the scripts folder and we'll make the scripts look big. We have a number of scripts here, and I'm not going to open and talk about every one, but I do want to point out that we have a few of these core systems in place. We have the character controller, which is the script I just showed you. It's a little bit of a kitchen sink script, otherwise known as a one size fits all, but it is the script that first and foremost controls this character's movement and takes input from me to basically influence everything in the game. We have a script called UI Manager, and this script handles UI and also some aspects of the game state. So when I want to know if I've won or lost, I actually always interface with this script, which also then manages which UI I see based on that state of the game. And then I have a third script here. We have a third script here called Health Tracker. And this script is actually responsible for managing the stress bar that you see in the version of the game, well, when you're playing. Let's see if I can find it and bring it up here for us. So Health Manager actually it's interfacing between the player, so the character controller, and the UI. So the UI is doing some business to display this on the screen, and the health manager is keeping track of where the player's health is at. So like health in this game is stress, but originally we were calling it health, and so the name has persisted. We could call this stress manager as well. It's doing things like when I run into a zombie, I take on stress. And this script is the script responsible for keeping track of that. Then the UI manager is the one that's actually displaying that current amount of stress on the screen so we can see it. So just to go back to my diagram here a minute. Just gotta find it. There it is. So, even though they have slightly different labels and slightly different distributions of what the different scripts are doing, we still have this modular setup where I do different things with different scripts, and I'm clear on what those are. So when you guys work on scripting for your games, one thing I would say that's important to consider is how are you going to divide up the systems in your game? And then how do you establish relationships among the various systems that you've set up? So let's do this. I'm going to create a new one. And I'm going to lay out those 3 core scripts that I just talked about. And then I'm going to take you guys through how I did the design, which is the task list for implementing the mask power up. Okay, so we've got the character controller here. And we know what that does. It's input, physics, the basics of this person that I'm moving on the screen. Next, I have this script called health tracker, I think. And this is keeping track of the health, right? So it's sort of like, whatever, I'll just write keep track of health, right? And then what we're calling this is actually stress. And then finally, in this game, I have one over here called UI Manager. And in that one, I'm display everything on the screen and show things or hide things, depending on what's going on in the game. That's what that script is doing. So I've got this relationship, right? Like if I move this character into a zombie, then I need to relate with this other script. Oops, that's not the one I want. This is the one I want. I need to know that I've run into a zombie so that I can change the total amount of stress that I'm keeping track of in my health tracker. And then my health tracker needs to continuously send my total stress over to the UI manager so the UI manager can display that on the screen. So I've got this nice setup, right? This one's kind of interfacing between the two. And now when I'm considering doing a power up, I can say, this is how my system works. I'm going to add a circle to this. And what I want to ask myself is, how does the new circle interact with the circles that I have? So we've got this model of the game system, and let's actually grab a little place to type. I've got a notepad here, and what I want to do is sort of lay out what I would want my power up to do. So I have a mask power up. And what I want this to do is, what I wanted it to do was, I'll write it out and then we'll make this into a task list, right? When I run over the mask, I don't increase my stress for X seconds, right? Because we can change the amount of seconds, but let's just say 20 seconds, right? And then when I run over the mask, it disappears. When I run over the mask, I get a particle effect that shows I'm in a power up mode. What else did I want that to do? When I run over a mask, I want to show a UI element that indicates I'm in a power up mode, right? So that's kind of the basics. And then, there are some other design requirements that would come from saying, I want to spawn masks, right? But let's actually leave it here, because what I did when I made this is I created the power up first as a game object in the scene. And then when it worked the way I wanted it to, I made it a prefab by dragging it into the project window, and then I deleted it out of the scene and created a mask spawner. So first I have to make this object. Cool. So let's see. Now that I've actually mapped out how I want this to work, what I need to do when I'm doing design for a game system is I look at these circles and I think, okay, how would this work given that this is how the scripts work that I already have? One thing I notice here is that everything I wrote has to do with me actually running into that game object. So the first thing is that I need to come into my character controller and notice that that's the script that tells me when I run into the mask. So I run into the mask and know that that's happened by some kind of trigger function, right? I could put an onTriggerEnter method. I may already have one. And in my new onTriggerEnter or existing onTriggerEnter method, what I can do is add an if statement that checks the tag of the object. I'm going to create a new tag called mask, and that's going to give me the information of when I've run into a mask. So I'm immediately thinking, okay, great. So I know where to write this logic. Character controller seems like a good spot because that's how I know like where the character is on the map and what it's running into, right? Good place to do it. So now I have this other thing here at the top of my list. I say, I don't increase my stress for 20 seconds. Sorry. Now I've got this kind of setup here with different scripts, and I need to figure out how to stop increasing stress when I hit. Ordinarily, stress would increase when I run into a zombie. I think I actually need to add here, I don't increase my stress for 20 seconds passively or when near zombies, right? So again, I'm being a little bit general here because this is all in my head about the way the game project works. So like, I'm guessing without looking at the code, but in here, I'm saying this is where I keep track of stress. And so my sense is I could create a Boolean, which is a true or false, that health tracker uses to check whether or not I'm in mask mode. So if I'm in mask mode, I would have an if statement in health tracker that said, don't increase stress. Cool. When I run over the mask, it disappears. That would be my next design thing. So because of course, like I don't want to run over a collectible and have it sit there. That's totally illogical. And for that one, I would probably do it in the same place that I did the onTrigger method. So, I often get into debates about this with whether or not to do that in the player controller or as a script attached to the object. So essentially what that means is, let's make this black. You might have a smaller circle here that's like power up script, right? Like we would call that mask something. And we might get the information about the player running into it and whether or not to turn it off in that script instead of in here. Because of course, the player can check an on trigger enter with an object in the world, and an object in the world can check an on trigger enter when running into the player. So that's one of those examples where you could do it either way. But one thing to keep in mind is if you want to have that object disappear, you're going to run the destroy method, which we know about from Emmy's toilet paper project. And if you want to destroy something, but keep any audio or particle effects that were attached, you'll need to work out a system for maintaining those aspects in the game world while getting rid of the 3D mesh and associated colliders and rigid bodies. So regardless of the way you set this up, you have to think about managing the audio-visual aspect of the power-up as well as the visual of it. I said audio-visual and then visual. That doesn't make sense, but audio and any other particles, programming functionalities, whatever. So if I had put this in the character controller originally for when the player runs into it, I would probably also try to destroy the object the player had run into once it hits that trigger, right? So either I have a small script here and this destroys itself when the player hits it, or I have the character controller script where if the other object is tagged as a mask, it's destroyed when the player runs into that object. All right. When I run over the mask, I get a particle effect that shows I'm in a power-up mode. Again, something I could probably do in character controller. However, one thing that's interesting to keep in mind is if I'm using a like a mask mode in Health Tracker, the best way to set this up would be to say, okay, I've created a Boolean in Health Tracker called mask mode. And when I'm in mask mode, I do things. I stop taking stress. I have a particle effect. Other things might happen. For example, I might play different music. So rather than keep creating a parallel mask mode in the character controller, I would just get that variable out of that script and turn on or off the particle effect accordingly. So I could do something like this. I could come down here and say health tracker.mask mode. And then using that, I would either say my particle is on, like those stars that were sticking up, or the particle is off if that's false, right? And what that would look like in this visual essentially is we're sending this down here and we're using it to make decisions in the character controller. You can do it either way. And then let me look at my final design requirement here. I want to show a UI element that indicates I'm in power-up mode. Cool. So I feel like it's obvious where I'm going to do that. It's obviously going to be in the UI manager because that's where I'm handling UI elements. And it seems, in fact, that since I'm mentioning mode again, what I would probably do here is I'm going to send mask mode over to this as well. So I'm going to, again, health tracker. Whoops, I don't want that to be purple because purple is for arrows. So here's health tracker.mask mode over in UI manager. And then my logic is easy. I can just say, if it's in mask mode, show this, right? Now, the way the game really works is obviously a bit more complicated than that because Dan did some really nice programming to like blink that thing on the screen. Very cool. So I'm simplifying a little bit here. You know, there's details to like how would you blink something and, you know, lots of little things that you can polish. But one of the things I think is the biggest obstacle to actually doing scripting is starting out without all of this mapped out clearly and being confused about like where you're getting information from and where you're sending information to. However, one thing that's really common to do in most game programming projects is to divide them up like this and send things back and forth between different scripts. So you guys have seen this before. There are different ways of getting information. You can drag it into the inspector with a public variable. You can find game object with tag, which David, I know you do that in your game. Also game object.find, which will look for the game object's name, I believe. So when you do those, what you're doing is you're looking for the script attached to a game object in the scene, and then accessing information like mask mode so that you can do additional logic according to the values of those variables. Now that I've made this crazy diagram, what I would then do is I would sit down and I would say, okay, now I'm going to program this. I'm pretty sure the most important thing for me to implement in this programming project is mask mode. So I want to create the variable of mask mode in Health Tracker and then make that public so that the other two scripts can access it. Next, in UI Manager and Character Controller, I would get a reference to the Health Tracker so I could access the value of mask mode. So once I had that reference, which would again be this, have my reference here. That is the most terrible underline I've ever drawn. All right, don't critique my art. Once I had that reference, then I would write the logic in each of the other two scripts. I would say, okay, have access to this Boolean that tells me if I'm in mask mode. I'm going to show this UI when mask mode is true in UI Manager. And what was I going to do in Character Controller? Oh yeah, I was going to show a particle effect. I was like, what? I'm going to show those stars like shooting up off of the player because I'm pretty sure that those particles are attached to the player game object. Now, once again, this isn't the only way of doing it, right? Like I could say, oh no, I don't want to do all of this. I'm just going to draw a gigantic circle and have it all be in one script because then I never have to get references. So I never have to do health tracker.mask mode. I can just do mask mode, right? Like, why would I have to draw all these arrows when I can just make one game that has everything in the player controller? And the reason to do it this way is because after you've created your alpha release where you just throw everything in and it's just working, and you want to add something into the game, the best way of being able to add things into a game is by drawing another circle. In other words, creating a script that's encapsulated in itself that implements the new system that you want to do. And, again, why is that easier? First of all, when you sit down at the script, you're writing something short and sweet, and you can troubleshoot just with that script. So if you know the game works, and then you introduce new code and it's broken, it's obviously only located within your new circle. And that's going to be really important because you want to be able to get back to the way it was before. And of course, you could revert to an earlier version in Unity. And I recommend you do that if you ever irrevocably break something. You can always go back to a previous version of your game. But when you're troubleshooting new logic, it's nice not to have to just revert and delete everything that you've done. And instead just say, okay, something's not working right. It has to do with this new script that I've written, plus maybe any integrations I've done in my current script, like I've added this mode, right? So it becomes very clear that I know what I need to look at as I'm doing the integration. However, if you have this one big script and you're like, get in there and, I'm going to change stuff and then change this and then change that. And then like, I'm messing around in update and I have like just tons of stuff in update. Of course, you can keep track of it if you're a brilliant mind, but it's going to be tough. And it'll take you a lot longer to implement something simple like this. And who wants things to take longer? That's my attitude. And my attitude is also about, always making it so that you understand what your game is doing when you're working on that programming level. So never getting into a thing of like, well, I threw a script in and I have no idea what it does. It's just acting some kind of way. I have done that. We have all done that. But ultimately, if you can know what all the pieces are and how they're relating with each other, then when you get a new creative idea, you're like, I know exactly how to implement that. You make a list like this, and then you look to see where you would insert each of those pieces. That's how you do a good implementation. All right. So, of course, that took me forever. And honestly, I don't even know if I really implemented it this way. I'm reconstructing the process that I went through. And the reality of this is, of course, that, I kind of started by finding the 3D model. Let's head back to the main character so we can see my lovely N95 mask again. Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you, Natalie. So, all right. I went and got this 3D model. Oh yeah, I forgot. I actually didn't add onto my list here. I have a particle effect. I have a UI element, and I have, when I run over the mask, I want to show the N95 mask on the player, right? So, I also included that, that's like essentially like turning on a particle effect. It's just like setting a game object active or inactive. So let me spawn my mask one more time. I have a kind of low spawn rate for my mask spawner, and I'm just gonna turn it down so we can see it right when I start playing the game, so you guys can see what the implementation was like after I went through this abstract thought process and did some coding. I love this song. I always like really get it in my head when I'm working on this game. Oh my lord. There it is. So yeah, I've got this game object here. I've got this particle effect attached to it. When I run over it, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. Hold on. The nice thing when you're playing a game is you can just like, oh, I'm gonna just like turn everything so that it's one stress. Okay. So when I run over it, it's going to disappear. I'm going to get a particle effect. I'm going to get a UI effect. And I'm going to be able to run next to the zombies. Totally cool, right? And I've got my N95 on my pedals. My UI element is counting down, which, as you can see from my design there, I would probably do that timer in the UI manager. And then I return back to non-mask mode, and all of the previous gameplay realities apply. So we've got the spawn rate on those is like instant. So I'm gonna select that thing again. Oh my gosh, I really have to, there's too many zombies spawning in here. It's too hard. Yeah. I also turned off when you click on the flowers too many times. Normally it pauses. I turned that off because I thought you should get to have it be fun. All right, so that's how it works. I didn't show any code, but what I did show you guys is how you would do a high-level design. And you kind of need to do that when you implement a new game system. It's helpful to do that when you sit down and create a prototype, but you don't have to do that. Sometimes it's nice to just not worry about stuff like that when you're at the early stages of a game. Just say, I don't care what the scripts are like. I'm just going to put it together. But you will find that this kind of setup, like with a game manager, a health manager, or whatever, UI, a lot of Unity videos that you watch on YouTube have that structure kind of underlying the scripts they show you. So they won't talk about this type of design layout, but they'll be like, oh, like here's some code. And it's if you already have your game set up in this modular way where you manage game state in one location and then like player controls in another, and then over here UI, and maybe your own script for audio management. It's often a lot easier to integrate code that you pull from projects that people on Unity will show you. I remember when I started learning to code and I would look at those, or Stack Overflow, and I'm just like seeing things and I would just be like, I understand how it works, but I don't understand how to put it in my project. I don't understand how to put it in my project is such a big challenge with learning to code online. And it's really what everybody deals with who does this kind of work. As Dan has said many times, it's not like hacker typer. You're not just typing it out. You're always doing this kind of research. And I would say that if you are able to, in your own project, say, I understand the relationships between the different scripts and how they support these different game systems, you will be much clearer on answering the question of, okay, I'm going to pull some code from the internet. How do I put it in my project? Well, I've pulled code that helps me, for example, blink a UI element, which is something I told you Dan did with that blinking coronavirus. That's a perfect example of something that you might look up online. You'd say, okay, so I have no idea how to make something blink. What's the code for that? So you go get that code and you're like, how do I put this in my project? With this diagram, you would know that I need to open this UI manager script. I need to get this reference to my mask mode that I've created in Health Tracker. And then once I've gotten that reference, I check to see if I'm in mask mode. And then if the answer to it is true, then I put that UI blinking code right in there. Does that make sense to you guys? So it's like you're creating a map of your logic. You're creating a map of your game systems. And every time you want to integrate something new, you take out your map and you're like, which magical land of this game project do I need to go to integrate this new system? Perhaps multiple of them. All right, so that's my take on doing design for you guys today. Just as a reminder, once again, I said it at the beginning and I'll reiterate it now. We do not have this cast on Monday. And on Wednesday, Brian and I will be dual casting right here and play testing. Narelle's like, I like how no one is responding. Don't worry, Narelle. No one responds when we just talk about Unity for 45 minutes straight. People always fall into a lull. I personally find it incredibly meditating. So like when meditative, I guess I should say, when Dan is casting, I always listen and I'm just like, it's so reassuring to hear someone talk so rationally about Unity. I'm absorbing information. But then sometimes he'll be like, do you guys have any questions? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. It's hard to think of questions because you're just in like absorption mode, But of course, if you do have questions, I'm always willing to answer them and more than happy to help if you guys have development, concerns or questions about your specific games. But your working deadline as of today should be Wednesday, the 27th. So that would be 1 week from today to push the most updated version of your game and have Brian and I play test it and give you feedback towards putting together a true beta release for this project. So put that down on your list for something to do in the next week or so. We have David's Trello, so we know what he's working on for 3 Fortnights at Home. For Emmy's unnamed toilet paper game, we are looking for some game state management. We're looking for some underlying systems work there to identify when you win or lose, and then also displaying that on the HUD, so we sort of know what the game state is. So David's question in the chat is, what's the difference between alpha and beta? Couple key differences there. Beta is just like, oh, it's a better release. The difference I like to identify there is often that an alpha would be a release that you test internally to your organization. So you're going to sit down with your quality assurance testers and have them play your game and give you feedback. So when you give a game to an internal tester, it's okay to give a game with some bugs or some unfinished features because they're part of the company culture and they're happy to work with you to deal with those bugs and revise the just contribute to ideas on which features should be implemented and how. And then a beta release is more polished. It has, rounds of iteration have been done on all of the main features of the game, and it's ready to be given to external testers. So people who don't work at your game studio but are maybe interested in playing an open beta, for example, that's the stage you think of being at when you release a beta. So in this studio, it's small, and a lot of times the testers are just like me or Dan. And what we're doing right now for this beta is we're casting Brian as our external testers. So we would be looking for a polished product that's really going to look fancy and impress Brian at this stage, and be thinking about what you need to do that game if you wanted to put it on itch.io. Okay, so we've said David's goals, I think we know. We want more engaging gameplay. Emmy's goals we know. And then Narelle is asking a goal for this cycle as well. Narelle, you kind of have two options. I was proposing that you do some work on elementals along with Tayshawn, who's doing some art assets for me. And then the other option is to work on the prototype you started in April. And it's up to you which one of those you want to do. But I would love to have you come work on elementals and for us to start creating a beta build of that project. So if you're up for that, you should download elementals on your computer at home. I don't know if you have that project downloaded yet. You're still on it, and when you pull it, you'll see it's exactly the way it was last summer. And one of the things that Dan and I talked about when we play tested it last week on our review of old games, great. He's saying then elementals it is. Excellent. We were looking for some significantly better UI. Okay, it's saying you don't have that project. I'll make sure I add you to the project just to make sure it's there in your Unity. So you might have to look in the gray ones, that you haven't downloaded. So look to see. Oh, I know what. I know why. So the name of the project is actually 2D platformer. So it doesn't say elementals on it. That's probably why you're not seeing it. It says like STUEDA 2D platformer in the hub. It's hidden. So look to see if you see anything that says 2D platformer. So for you, Narelle, I would say if you're able to pull the project, then awesome. I would say go to town on the UI for that game. We need a menu UI. It basically has one button you click on to start the game. We need a tutorial. And ultimately, we'll be revisiting the level design. But I want to see the art assets I get from Tayshawn before we start making revisions to the really great designs David worked up for us last summer. So I'd love to see you. Actually, Dan did some phenomenal videos about juicing up a game. Narelle, I think you were out during this, but there's a few past videos where Dan showed some really snazzy things you can do with UI and particle effects that would be really fun improvements, even to the way the game is now, that we could then, in the spirit of making maps like this, we could start to integrate more gameplay and more fun stuff to do, including those really fun, delicious, juicy elaborations that make it feel more satisfying to play that game. So I will try to find which past video that was, Neural, and share it with you so you can rewatch. There have been two really good ones that he did about like making buttons go like this when you hover over them. Ooh, it's so great. And some really fun particle stuff. So I would love to see even just a couple improvements on elementals, even if you just create a nicer splash initial menu for the game. I would love to show that to Brian next week. So I think that's goals for everybody. I'm excited that everybody's here. Hopefully your school year is gradually wrapping up in the direction of not being too stressful. I will not see you on Monday, but I will see you guys on Wednesday next week. Fire monster. Yes, I know. That's what David's saying. Okay, we need that. Just was there art for that, or did we just ask for art and then he didn't finish? Because we definitely need that. The other thing I was gonna say, I realized I was looking at that project. Doesn't the monster like throw a coin at you right now? Like I feel like it's a coin that is the projectile. So like maybe it could be like not a coin, but an example of doing a really cool particle effect would be Neural saying, I don't know, yeah. Even if it is a coin that you're throwing, have a particle effect go off when it hits something, right? Dan was talking about this, saying like when the projectile hits a shield, we should see a visual effect so that we know it's hit the shield as opposed to damaging the player. So I'm just thinking like if we had the fire monster, it'd be so cool to like have it throwing a little like projectile that has like particle effect kind of pixel flames and then when it hits you. So but yeah, some menu for that. Yeah. All right. I'm going on and on. I just get too excited about making games. David, I'm going to pull your project and check it out this week. So I haven't looked at it in I think about a week, and I haven't looked at Emmy's either. So let's see, it's Wednesday. I'll pull them on Friday and just see what you guys are working on. And if you guys do want help with something minor, you can always just email us. A 1-sentence email is fine with me. I will help you guys out. So if we're good to go, I'm going to sign off. Be in touch with me. I will be in touch with you. And I will be back in a week playtesting your game projects with Brian. Have a great week. Have a great weekend, guys. Neural says, now go sleep. Bye. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. See you later.